So the White Lotus is absolutely incredible. I love how popular this show has become. I just think it's so cool to go on this massive, brilliant, ultra luxury holiday with a group of absolutely unlikable individuals. But even though they are super unlikable, it is super addictive. I don't know what that says about us as a society, but I just feel like this show has really captured the zeitgeist in such a good way. However, even though season 3 was really, really good, I don't think it's as good as the brilliant season 2, which truly was peak TV. And every single episode of season 2 was truly brilliant, whereas I feel like in season 3, it was a little bit more similar to season 1, where they're just building something, which is great because it definitely does all pay off towards the end. But I do feel like there were a couple of boring moments in season 3, whereas with season 2, it just consistently got better and better, and every single episode, like I said, was so good. But one thing that I do love across every single season is that they bring together very unique groups of individuals, and season 3 was no different in terms of bringing 3 best friends who are all gossiping about one another, a crumbling perfect family, at least from the outside perspective, a couple who have a large age gap, and then we of course bring back Belinda from season 1, who is on a hotel transfer, but we'll definitely talk a lot more about Belinda in a minute. But first, let's talk about the ending. So shockingly, it was an absolute bloodbath in the first 2 seasons. It's like, who is going to be the person that is going to be killed off? Whereas in season 3, they killed off so many people. So let's start with Lockie first. So Jason Isaacs was finally able to show how much of a brilliant actor he is by his emotional response. You can just feel all of the emotions that are overcoming Tim in terms of guilt, upset, grief. Now, I've looked at so many Reddit threads, but no one's really been able to explain how on earth Lockie was able to survive this. It was a little bit predictable though, that out of all of the family members, he was going to be the one that was going to die. As you just know that they're going to be doing something Shakespearean with the fact that Tim wants to kill off all of the other 4 members of his family, including himself, and he has selected Lochan to be the one that is going to survive. But of course, as fate would have it, it would ultimately be reversed. Now, I know by the end, they all are able to survive. They've all learned a lot from the whole experience of season 3, especially Saxon. We'll come to him in a minute as well. But I do feel like it was great that Lochan was able to survive. But I do feel like it's really bizarre that they have this suicidal fruit in this massive wellness retreat. And then speaking of the other family members, Saxon has been completely transformed by Chelsea. I mean, the Saxon that we see at the end of this show is completely different to the guy that we saw right at the start. And then speaking of Chelsea, absolutely heartbreaking how she was unfortunately caught in the crossfire with Rick, and Mike White has said that he wanted to make this a bit of a Greek tragedy, and there was so much foreshadowing coming from Chelsea in terms of, you know, they are going to be together forever. If only it was screamed earlier on to him that this is actually his father. And also, if only he would have spoken to the therapist and actually had this session with her, maybe it would have gone down a very, very different road. I'll expand upon this in a minute when we talk about every single character, but I do feel like it's so powerful how they really were able to show, with the Rick character in particular, that when you're overcome with emotion, especially anger and hatred, and this has been building for such a long time, then actually it's really, really, really difficult to neutralize all of your emotions and try to have calmness as your whole body and mind is just so overcome with negative emotions. And I actually feel like the storyline of Rick through this show is such a good lesson that I think people can learn from in terms of really making sure that they don't go down this negative spiral. Now, Carrie Coon's speech, the monologue right at the end, was absolutely brilliant. And even though there was so much tension building between all of these best friends, mainly between Michelle Monaghan's character and Carrie Coon's, it was really nice that they were able to be reunited, and actually this whole tension thing made them a lot stronger. Belinda also is now $5 million richer, getting the money. I thought it was so brilliant how she worked so cleverly with her son. An absolute negotiation masterclass by the two of them. And the cycle is continuing in terms of doing to Pornchai what Tanya did to her. I thought that was so chilling, how she used the exact phraseology of Tanya to this guy. So unbelievable. And speaking of lessons where we can learn from different characters, I think Guy Tok is super interesting, such an unassuming character as the series is progressing. But in the final couple of moments, he totally gives up on his faith, and when he does this, He gets the girl of his dreams, he gets the job of his dreams, but at what cost, as he is now playing with the devil in terms of giving up all of his faith and his religion. So I just feel like this, from a storyline perspective, is super interesting, especially as the hotel owner sounded very devilish when she was just encouraging him to kill Rick. Very similar to Palpatine telling Anakin Skywalker to just do it. So I absolutely love the way in which the White Lotus season 3 took a bit of a life of its own on social media with all of the fan theories. So let's go through some of the best ones. So the first one was everybody was thinking that Saxon might be the person that kills off Tim, as he has worked so hard to be successful and now he is just blaming his father for just ruining everything. Before Piper succumbed to her privilege thanks to her mother, I think it was interesting that people were thinking that she is going to run away in a very similar way to how we saw Quinn doing in season 1. And then speaking of Victoria, I loved the theory that she is the person that actually sabotaged Tim in the first place in terms of setting him up when she found out the truth about all of the money laundering, and somehow she is going to make sure that he takes all of the blame and maybe she's got some hidden money that he doesn't know about. So let's go through all of the individual characters next. So I think Patrick Schwarzenegger was so brilliantly casted as Saxon. I mean, he started off this show as such an unlikable, douchey jock that you've just seen so many times in movies and TV shows. But then by the end of this series, he becomes somebody completely different, mainly down to two things. One, because of the moon party and his shock and disgust over what Lachlan has done to him, and also because of the fact that he has been pursuing Chelsea for so long and she has just been rejecting him, and he is clearly the type of guy that isn't used to rejection. But not only that, she is able to dig into his heart, as he is clearly under the impression that he is so much more appealing than Rick. But then Chelsea is saying, look, it would just be meaningless sex getting with you, because actually Rick is able to give so much more deeper emotion and connection that Saxon will never be able to give. Whereas the Saxon that we see by the end of this series really wants to become that person. Similarly, I absolutely love Parker Posey's Victoria character in this show, as she starts off as this aloof, absolute snob of a woman, but then she is really able to open the audience's eyes to see that she is so much more intelligent than meets the eye, and how she knows her daughter better than her daughter knows herself, as she knew the way in which to get her out of this mindset of wanting to spend the rest of her life in Thailand is by doing two things. One, completely removing any animosity or any challenge coming from her and just being like, look, if you want to do this, you do this. And in turn, this then leads into the second thing, which is just really making her tap into her entitlement, which she will not be able to access by having this new lifestyle. And just seeing the way that Piper just reacted when the penny dropped with this was absolutely shocking. And you can really see all of the grins coming from Victoria when she sees that her plan worked. Like I said, Jason Isaacs' Tim character was really brilliant by the end, when you got to really see his acting range with what is happening with his son Lachlan. But for the first 7 episodes, it was just so one-dimensional in terms of this guy panicking, always wanting to look at his phone, having so many panting sequences up and down the villa, just huffing and puffing all the time. I loved all of the commentary that people were saying on X about this guy. In terms of right at the end, he is making mental notes about who is going to survive based on their love for money. I absolutely loved Aimee Lou Wood's performance as Chelsea in this show, as she really was able to steal everyone's heart in terms of how pure she is and how much she just wants to wake Rick up to just make him appreciate and value what he has right in front of him. And even though her friend was being really honest in terms of like, look, I am with this older guy because of all of the financial benefits that I can have from this relationship, whereas with Chelsea, you can see that she genuinely and really does love Rick for who he is. And then we have to talk about Walton Goggins. So I think firstly, he just voices Cecil from the Invincible animated show, absolutely brilliant. But he also does a good job in terms of playing Rick. And I also feel like out of all of them, Rick kind of feels like the main character from the ensemble. And it's just really tragic with this character. As like I said earlier, he is just overcome with anger, rage, hatred, and this has just overcome him to the point where he unfortunately just can't see things rationally. Now, I do actually think that the portrayal of Rick was done in a really good way, as it doesn't seem that far-fetched, and everybody can have a really bad day and bad time and bad couple of years, and it can be really difficult to get yourself out of that negative spiral once you're in it. But one thing that I think that this show did really, really well is to show the consequences of just staying in this negative spiral, as he literally had the potential of having such a happily ever after, but unfortunately due to his actions, he completely destroyed it. Natasha Rothwell was so good once again as Belinda. It was really nice to have a bit of a continuation with the Tanya storyline, and she was so good in season 1. Such a lovable character, you really are rooting for her. But then it's so shocking what then happens. Firstly, she is able to immediately recognize Gary/Greg, and then the fact that she goes down this negotiation mission with her son and then is able to convince Greg of giving her $5 million to stay silent for everything that happened with Tanya, and then she is just doing to Pornchai what Tanya did to her. But not only that, she is using the exact same words that Tanya did to her, so literally the cycle is continuing. Even though the dynamic was interesting to watch with Michelle Monaghan, Leslie Bibb and Carrie Coon, I do feel like unfortunately they were the weakest out of all of the characters, as they didn't really do that much. I mean, they had a bit of jealousy against one another, they had a little competition with one another, they were gossiping about one another, but I do feel like Carrie Coon's brilliant monologue right at the end about life and learning and time was really, really powerful. Contrastingly though, I do feel like Guy Tok and Mook were brilliant. I feel like as the series is progressing, you're thinking that this storyline is pretty weak, you're not really that invested in it, but by the end, it is just unbelievable. Firstly, Mook really is the person that I feel is gaslighting Guy Tok in terms of making him the person that she wants him to be. I mean, you could argue that, you know, she is being really positive in terms of making him more ambitious, but it's a little bit similar to Joaquin Phoenix's Joker and Lady Gaga's Harley Quinn's reaction in terms of when she is just seeing the real Joker, she is just not attracted to him at all. In a very similar way, when Mook is seeing that Guy Tok isn't really that ambitious as an individual and opts to prioritize his faith over everything else, she is just not wanting to be with him. Which is fair enough. If that's not what she is attracted to, that's fine. But Guy Tok's response to this is then maybe I should try to be the person that she wants me to be, and is ultimately sacrificing his religion in order to become this person. When he then went down this bad boy path, it was surprising that he decided to let the robbers get away with everything, even though they were the ones that created so much difficulty for him. It's interesting with the original bodyguards, as they were so abusive towards him, but then ultimately he was able to get the last laugh in terms of taking their job. So, you know, the White Lotus season 3 was really, really good. I feel like the premise and all of the different individual storylines that they were creating was really, really good. It just wasn't as gripping as the brilliant season 2 was. And so for all of those reasons, I'm going to give the White Lotus season 3 a solid 6.5 out of 10. Now I'd love to hear from you. What did you think of the White Lotus season 3? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, and I look forward to seeing you in my next video.